Wow.
Wow.
Wow, this is some really deep stuff.
I don't know what just happened, but something happened inside of me. Something snapped. Something.
I wasn't expecting that
either. Sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. It's beautiful.
Monster is like really small, but it had to become that to stop me.
And then the hurt child became present when you mentioned it.
And I didn't realize this until now.
There were things that I didn't remember until now.
Funny. I haven't seen that before.
It feels like I'm the monster. I'm kind of seeing images of things. Of a world where they can exist. This clarity brings all kinds of answers.
It's clear. She hugged me and then went back to her place, I guess, in my heart. Oh, it wants to come out. It wants to bippity boppity boop Cinderella me. She's melted into my chest. It's ooey gooey.
All week been finishing things, cleaning up more, started eating vegetables again last week. And it kind of just started happening. It's almost like I just finished going through a meditation session.
I feel light. When you hit that first joint, in the morning, and
I actually feel a lot more awake.
All right.
Okay. Well, actually, that last silent bit brought up something that I think maybe we'll start to explore. It's at least maybe a trailhead.
Okay.
So there's been a noticeable part of me that always develops where you live it out. It's just this uncomfortable feeling. You don't spend any time with it. It's kind of a nudge type of experience.
Okay.
And the other day I just kind of sat with it a bit, and I did get the sense that it's a very distinct part. And it kept coming up with this feeling that with the label FOMO, the fear of missing out kind of feeling.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that it was kind of a parallel to and I think we've discussed this before, that these feelings, so I'm going to step back a moment. I think we've talked a bit about there were times when I feel this black cauldron of things filled with kind of more energy, heavier type energies. Yeah, okay. And one of those I remember, I think we discussed, was loneliness. I hadn't realized I had actually been a lonely child.
Mm-hmm.
And this FOMO came up recently, and it felt very similar to that process, the discovery of the loneliness. It felt like the discovery of FOMO. Oh, my Lord. This part is really struggling with this fear of missing out on things. And I think it's a distinct part. I think it's a part of me from very, very, very early on. So, maybe this is some way a trailhead that we can.
Sounds like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something that comes up for you. You mentioned that you hadn't spent much time with it. It kind of felt like sort of a background thing.
Exactly.
Okay. So when it does come up, how have you noticed it? What does it feel like when it's up?
It feels like a heightened energy. It's a higher vibration, almost like not a full-blown anxiousness, but some level of angst, like which is why it's kind of the FOMO thing. It's it's a discontentment with a little bit of anxiety mixed together, if that makes any sense at all.
Okay.
It feels kind of like a heightened, you have to look over there. There must be something over there. That kind of energy. And I can feel a tenseness when it comes up.
All right. Okay. How do you feel towards it now?
I'm very curious about it, but I also feel tender towards it. Not tender from it, but tender towards it. Kind of like a compassion type feeling.
Okay. Curious and compassionate.
Yeah.
Okay. We let it know that.
Yeah. It's reacting with some hesitancy.
Okay.
Saying almost, why now? Why now? Why now are you suddenly seeing me?
There's some grief or anger behind that of, why didn't you see me before? Yeah. How do you respond to that?
I say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Part that wants to pop up and give all the reasons why. Justify the overlooking, the not seeing. And I don't think that's self. I think it's a separate, blended with self, who wants to constantly analyze and explain all the workings of how things are happening.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say to it, I'm asking, do you need attention? Are you?
Right.
I don't believe you're part. I think we're blended.
Right.
But I can see that you're struggling.
The analyzer and explainer.
Justify, yeah. And I don't actually, I'm curious as to why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is I'm sorry not just enough?
Right. And, it could be that, let's say this part that we called the fear of missing out, maybe it wants more explanations and stuff, in which case we can find that out from it. So we can stay open to that. But yeah, if there's a part that wants to jump in and do that as a response, you could ask it for space. Or like you said, see if it needs anything from you.
It's explaining a bit to me. It's saying, I always am at the ready to justify. There's always an explanation to be provided, be explored.
And that's been really, really valuable
in
a lot of ways. Just think it.
Sense making. That's what it's telling me. It's allowed sense making of so many things in life. And I'm thanking it because I know that's true.
Yeah.
And now I'm asking if it would mind if it
Great.
Some space to further return to the fear of missing out part. It says that's okay, but it too would like conversation at some point.
Great. I can make a note of that.
I was just going to ask if you would please do that, because it's saying thank you. It's my parts have a tendency to trust in you, and they feel very happy when you say you'll make a note because they trust you'll come back with it.
All right. Well, I've got it circled. I got a box beside it and double circled. That's top of the list there.
All right. So it's willing now, knowing that it's noted and will be returned.
Yeah.
Step back a little and give space to the I'm sorry and let it hang and not have to.
Yeah. Yep. See if you can get back to that part that's feeling anxious, discontent.
So I'm asking it, I'm back with it.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledging that I'm grateful for all its wonderful activity on my own behalf.
Does it feel like you understand all of its wonderful activity?
No,
Okay.
but it's quite pleased that I have a sense of gratitude.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not with, but.
Right. So you can just ask it, what it does want you to know about itself or anything it wants you to know.
It's saying there's a lot to know, that there've been years of this kind of latent fear of missing out experience that I've never noticed, but it drove me or was driving behaviors. So I'm asking how it wants me to grow in understanding from where I am now to get to know it.
Yeah.
And it's saying probably we need to move towards the origins of it, but it feels a little bit sensitive towards that.
Okay.
Feels vulnerable at that, although it acknowledges. And so I'm wondering if maybe it's some part in me pushing or.
Well, okay, so if this is a protective part, let's say, then I think it's safe to assume that there are vulnerable origins that might even be exile parts. So that could just be a fact about protectors.
Okay.
And those would be valuable things to understand about it. And they're also things that can come after we understand how this part is doing in the moment, or anything it wants you to know about itself.
Okay. It welcomes that small step to talk about how it's doing in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, what's it been like for it?
Saying it's been an anxious burden is how it's describing it. It's full.
And it's felt important.
Yeah, it says I'm necessary. Absolutely necessary.
Okay.
And I asked why, and the answer was because it always has to have an eye out to keep things moving, to protect, because there has to always be something somewhere else it's the grass is greener type mentality. And it feels a great responsibility for being just constantly alert all the time for potential.
For potential for positive change.
Yeah. And it's hard being so alert all the time.
Yeah, I bet.
Especially when it's so unnoticed, like invisible, actually. It's saying to me, it's not that you didn't notice, it's that
Yeah.
I was invisible. Like you had no clue. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't, it
Yeah.
was more than just not being noticed.
Right. And it has a concern about, like, if you don't keep moving,
Yeah.
that would be a problem.
Yeah. Its response to that concern when you phrased it that way was you'll be stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be stuck in this hell.
Okay.
There has to be something better than this. And everybody else looks happy and fine and grand and great and all those things. So clearly, you have to stay on the move and keep an eye out.
Okay. So it's becoming more clear to me why it's so necessary for this part to do what it does, because it has an experience of you being stuck in hell.
Yeah.
And others looking happy.
Yeah. It's funny, it's sending me this warm, kind of red hued, don't worry, you won't be here forever. That's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll keep you moving away from this at all times.
Yeah. So it's got a hopeful, positive, directed kind of energy.
Yeah. It's a can do and will do kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep it. There's always somewhere. There's always somewhere.
Right.
The shadow side of that is that the emotional aspect of it is that it surfaces as this fear of missing out. There's a constant scanning for that next best thing for that place finally to set and be content.
Yeah, that's what makes it a burden for the part to have that burden of feeling like it has to do that.
Yeah, there's no rest for the weary, and this part says, like, there's just no turning this off.
Yeah. How would it feel about telling us more about the hell that it wants you not to be stuck in? With a reminder that none of it needs to be shared with me or published.
It's fine. It's not the least bit uncomfortable. It's the part is referring back to the little one that we've worked with before, the exile. It's pointing to life circumstances from very, very early on, even, and I don't know if this happens with parts, but it's trying to make the distinction that the little one, as I've worked with it as an exile, is kind of, 5-year-ish, 10-year-ish, that kind of has this range of age feel.
Yes.
And this part is, I think it's a precursor to that exile.
Okay.
Is that, I guess that's possible, right?
I don't know. It would surprise me, how I usually think of protectors as developing as a response, to a difficult situation, right? And so part of us gets exiled because it's not welcome, not up for that, in danger, and another part shows up to protect. So normally I see them as born out of the same thing, or a protector coming kind of after the experience of an exile, but we can find out more, and I'm always open to differences in how systems work.
Yeah. No, that was helpful to hear you say that. It said in reaction to your explanation of how you normally expect things.
Mhm.
That it's that this function that it plays comes from even before the 5-year mark.
Okay.
And that it's saying to me that it's from that time that the hell extended from the beginning into many years, and that the actual cognitive memories of some of it
Yes.
are not like
right
fully there. And
right.
but
okay.
but this is seated in
Got it.
in all of that's its explanation for that. Does
Great.
that?
Yeah. It has
Right.
it's remembering a hell from before age 5. It's remembering a hell from before the exile known as the little one's experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that the little ones, what it's trying to kind of make clear is a little bit like a picture, that the little one is an exile that is tapped into my cognition. So roughly from about 5, I have memories.
Right.
But that the run up to the exile that exists as I've described it actually comes from before as well. So it's more encompassing than just say 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And I guess that makes some sense, because foundationally as humans, we usually don't remember much before age 5, but we know that in utero up to age 5 it can be hugely impactful.
And that's where we're developing all kinds of protectors, and especially the kinds of protectors that are in the background, right? They're kind of invisible because that's the water we're swimming in, is the protectors that we develop before age 5, for example.
Yeah. It's agreeing with you.
Okay. Yeah, and I just want to welcome it to be as not cognitive as it wants. If we have, we do have the analyzer and explainer part that we've asked for space. We do have the little one, exile, that you're saying has more of a cognitive and memories associated with it. And it's okay for this part to show how it shows what it shows. It doesn't have to make sense in the same logical cognitive way.
Yeah. That lands well.
Yeah.
It's saying it wants to somehow help, and this has always been its goal, but right now in conversation, it has this, I want you to understand what hell was, because you only have a cognitive awareness of part of it.
Yes, I'm totally with it on that. We need to understand what it was working so hard to protect, or if it's hell to get you away from. And again, that it will likely kind of put us more and more in kind of exile territory, which is fine. We can choose how much we want to go there and what feels right.
Yeah, right. At the moment, it's showing me, the life reel thing. My parts love life reel.
Yeah.
It's showing me some images from times that are kind of probably the 5-ish age, and saying, do you remember these? These were all indicators of everything that came before it.
Yeah.
and trying to connect those things that were just individual, kind of vague, if even memories. And it's saying these are all connected. All of this relates one to the other to the other.
Okay.
And I can see that now from this vantage point, from the fear of missing out's vantage point.
Yeah.
That kind of, it's emphasizing this feeling of envy for other people's lives.
Yeah.
And that's a type of suffering that it was reacting to.
Right. Yeah. The suffering, the envy for others' lives is there, and its response is, okay, let's get moving. Let's go to that greener grass. Let's help ourselves.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Just a constant, I mean, it just keeps stressing, and I can feel it now. I'm starting to feel it a bit, that this was from before I could even move, this kind of, almost as a baby, hand me over to someone else, please. This is uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep.
And to think that is, I mean, that's a pretty early on, grass is greener.
It is. Yeah.
And it's emphasizing that this all very much all ties into that, fear of safety, which is so purely critical and fundamental to the youngest of children.
Did you say fear of safety?
Yeah. Or no, a lack of safety. So there's fear from a lack of safety. There was this recognition that things weren't safe from, like I said, from like being a baby and just wishing to be handed off to somebody else.
Okay.
Which of course is not really a memory. It can't be a memory, but it's very memory-esque in the way it's presenting it to me. It's kind of life real, which is interesting to me, because this is the first time I've had a kind of a precognition conversation. Well, not that cognizant they are.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Just try to stay open. Try to stay open because, right, this is the first time. And yeah, how that might show up, we don't know. So yeah, if it's not memories, but it's something else, I would just try to stay open to however it wants to point you there, or to help you understand more about its job and the importance of its job, and if it has any other kind of pointers to those other parts. Does it see you as being able to help it by working with maybe those other parts that might feel still stuck back there?
it's bringing up this thing about expectation, saying, even in utero, you are essentially, it's communicating, created and born from expectations. And that is, and I think we've talked about that before. I can't remember one of the Exiles' work, maybe. I don't clearly remember it, but it's pointing to that. And it's saying that weight of expectation from conception on through life has been a heavy, heavy weight, and added to this need to keep moving and to kind of get away from the weight of it and create other aspects of life or other lives but the expectations, of course, were ingrained from creation onward. So you can't really outrun them, it's saying.
Yeah. Right. And so here we are. We're here to meet the parts and to meet their burdens.
Yes. It's saying that it understands that it had to be invisible to some degree because it started from the very, very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how does a fish know it's in water type
Mm-hmm.
situation? Like,
yeah.
It's just always been there is the message it's trying to give me. There's never been any distance or separation from it. It's just been inherently part of my embodied experience. And so it's cutting me some understanding by saying, as much as it wants to say, why now? Why are you now noticing me? That's a bit of it's more a surprised reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when does the fish notice it's in water?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You could try asking it what it needs from you, what it would like from you now that you are here with it and going forward.
Interestingly, it's saying it needs to feel a very strong and clear sense of self. It doesn't, it's saying it's just been such a part of me for so long that it doesn't in any way feel safe stopping any of the kind of cluster of behaviors that relate to this fear.
Right.
It just, it needs a leader, basically, that it can trust in and know that it's competent and present and able to see all of what was.
Yeah. So that's something that we could offer it. Again, we might not have a really clear picture of what this exile, who this being is, but you could ask it, if you were to try going to the part that had that envy or that discomfort with being held by who it's being held by, or that feeling of not being safe, or the weight of expectations, does this part see how you might bring a self to that one, to an exile who's burdened with the expectations? Would it like that?
Yeah, it's using an image that it's kind of like an aperture. It's dark and it's opening and some light is coming through. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. Clearly the aperture can open or close.
Yeah, just stay with it. Curious and compassionate.
It's saying to me, obvious, maybe, although not obvious, maybe to you, but obvious, there is this functioning of an aperture, and until it feels the opening and the light, it's unable to kind of unburden it in any way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm asking it, is there a time or a place or what do I need to create that openness and the light shining through?
Yeah. And good question. I have also a question.
Okay, please.
Which is, um, is this part itself kind of asking for more of your light, or is it again kind of pointing you to that part over there, which I'm guessing is an exile?
Yeah, it said it's pointing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it has this
Right.
kind of ocean-like image that it's also providing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's like kind of being under the ocean and the sunlight's above, and it's I don't know, it's not quite 100% clear to me, but yeah, it's pointing it away from itself when you ask that question.
Yes. Yeah. You could ask it if it wants to show you anything else about that one, the one with the burdens of expectations.
It's interestingly showing me, and it's very image driven,
Mm-hmm.
of like a pearl in an oyster shell.
Mm-hmm.
And the shell is closed. And of course, there's no way to know that there's actually a pearl in there because
Uh-huh.
it's closed,
Right.
protected. And that the shell itself is very not attractive. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the antithesis of the actual pearl that's inside. So it's
Right.
showing me this dichotomy that exists in this being, this creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's pointing to the pearl and kind of saying you need to allow that pearl out. It is
Yeah.
in there,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't need to be the external kind of less
Mm-hmm. Right.
imageful exterior,
Uh-huh.
hardened and closed.
Mm-hmm. The exterior is the protection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is, the protectors are what separates the self from exiles.
Aha. So it's actually describing its place, I guess, is what
It's self slash any other protectors. It could be 100 other protectors, around an exile. And I don't want to make meaning where there isn't, or tell it what its experience is, but that's what I'm picturing when I hear a protective, a shell that's weathered and not as attractive, and it has a job of protecting, and there's something inside that's vulnerable and quite different.
Yeah. It's agreeing with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's saying that it's using images because I asked it why, because usually I have these very distinct life reels and saying that can't exist in this kind of precognition beginning.
Right.
And it's this watery, oceany kind of aspect because there's this in utero aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
It's saying you have to come at this from saying more holistic approach, less analytical. This is a cognitive memory take that as the trailhead. It's saying it's more deeply embedded, like the pearl in its shell.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what I was hinting at the start of the call, or earlier when we met. This part is the memories, the cognitive stuff that might not be a way in. And this could be a good time to circle back around to the analytical protector that we said we would revisit. Because if I'm hearing it right, this part's saying you need a holistic approach, and that means not an analytical approach. That's the first thing that came up. So
exactly. Okay, so
does that feel right? Does that feel?
Yeah, it does. It's saying, look, the analytical piece is a bit of a barrier.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yes, you can thank this one for all of its guidance and all of its hard work. And if it feels right, we can try turning back to the analytical one.
Yeah, that's fine with that.
Okay. Yeah, the analyzer and the explainer.
Yeah, so I've asked it if it's okay if we come back and visit with it. It's happy with that.
Great. What does it want you to know about itself?
It's going on and on and on about how useful it's been in life.
Yeah. And what's your reaction to that?
Oh, I'm just agreeing with it. It's
Me too.
Just like a yes fest.
Yeah. It doesn't need to convince you.
Not at all.
Right. Yeah. Show it that.
Yeah.
Show it that. It is a convincing part. It does a lot of. It's persuasive, and it has the ability to justify and give the evidence, right?
Yeah,
Make the case for things.
Logical. It's very heavy lifting. It's
yeah.
So playing a very central role in the system. It and
absolutely.
Sally and the analyzer really they had a real gig going for a while.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, so you can thank it, let it know that you see that quality and that positive quality and effect that it has. And just let it know that it doesn't have to convince you.
No.
That it's valuable.
It's interesting because it's saying to me, do you feel that tug you felt your whole life? I'm that tug where I was so high performing, so good at my job, that you were, as an embodied being, so high functioning in the logic and analytic spheres. But you always felt a tug and tried to lean away from it. Yeah. Because it was also uncomfortable, because it was. And it's interesting because now I see it. Now that it's saying that, I can actually, now a cognitive life reel is starting to run, of all those moments where this part was, I guess it was pushing. I guess pushing is a word I could use, in me directions that were so logical and so analyzed and so put together. And then there was this huge thing that always came and just would pull me away and say, no, you can't bear those details. You can't, it's all just uncomfortable. It was like wearing an itchy suit.
Okay.
And
interesting.
I can see that now. It's saying to me, do you see the struggle? That's the shadow side of my high performance. And it's important to understand that. That's what it's saying to me. And it's interesting because I feel a bit of that tension as I'm talking to this piece. It's kind of stiff neck, that stiff upper lip tension. And there's this recognition that my body, as I'm with these parts, was far more fluid and comfortable with the previous part that had just images and more fluidity to it.
Yeah. So there's that huge thing that is kind of in opposition or has had friction with this analyzing part.
Yeah. And it's saying, it keeps asking me over and over, do you recognize that this has been a fundamental discrepancy for you? It's a highly performing, functioning in all this analytic logic space with no difficulty. You're welcome.
Right.
And then there's the tug.
Yeah. Who is the tug? What is that?
I was just wondering that myself.
Maybe the analyzer knows.
Yeah, the analyzer is saying that's the tug of blended parts with self, which is interesting to me. It's saying it's the creativity. It's the expressive creativity that has been reined in
by the itchy suit.
Exactly. And we've talked about reins before.
Yes.
Hearts want to pull back on those reins. Somehow this is all mapped in together. Well, I guess it's a system, it should be. But
I'm wondering if the itchy suit is the clamshell, and one of the things that it's surrounding and occluding is the creativity that's been exiled.
I had a very warm rush of energy when you said that. And an image of the pearl came up.
Yeah.
And it's saying there's the analytic part is saying that the structure it has provided, so helpful, so propelling in an embodied life, has been an friction as well.
Right.
And it's been a barrier. And that it's contained truths from being expressed.
Yep.
And it was so wonderfully safe. So I'm really thanking it for that, because I recognize it was a suit of armor.
Provided the safety, right?
It was something, and it's saying that to me, you could always rely on me. And you always did rely on me.
Right. How old does it think you are?
It's in that kind of when you start school age, that you're entering the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
How old it thinks I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's recalling it's giving me a life reel that is not an actual life reel. So it's an interesting approach. It's a life reel where it's placing me kind of in my first school experience, which I quasi-cognitively have some grasp on. I'm not, but it's also pointing to a particular experience in that setting before I moved on to, kind of more conventional schooling.
Yeah.
And it's recanting this story, and it's funny because it's a blended thing, because I know I can't it's a story that I heard over life and then saw later written in some school records. But I don't think it's an actual cognitive memory as such. So it's kind of this blended, kind of borrowed from other people's memories and then retold and then substantiated by looking in a file. But it's interesting. It's pointing to this experience, which is not really, as I said, an experience per se. And it's showing how hard it works, this analytic logic, perfectly geared for education type heart. Knows how to perform. And it's interesting because it's pointing out that there was such external questioning of that, not me external people, circumstances, doubtful.
Sure.
And it's saying that just fueled my performance even more, my drive, my.
Because you could rely on it.
Exactly.
Right. And what does this part think about you at your current age, bringing self energy, doing parts work, and what does it think about stepping aside as a barrier to the pearl and whatever you might discover about it and bring to it?
Mixed feelings. It's saying to me, look, I can't deny that you're doing the right thing and that you're probably ready for me to stand down. It recognizes that, and it's giving me pure recognition of that. But it's also saying, I don't think you're ready to let go of this part that has so formed and driven your embodied life experience.
Yeah.
It's in that tension itself.
Yeah. So we're going to be asking it to do some letting go of its tension and its burden, not for you to let go of parts.
Right.
The goal of the self is to embrace the parts and to understand them, help them, heal them, love them.
Right. And as it was saying that to me about its tension, it's acknowledging, which I thanked it for, that it recognizes that probably the time is here, it's finally come, but that it has this reservation, that tension. Immediately I didn't, but thought, and now will say to it, okay, I respect and I'm sensitive to that tension for you.
Yes.
The question that came, which I'm now going to pose, is, well, you're wonderful and beautiful and capable. What else would you like to do? And there's just a warm feeling from asking that question.
Yeah. Yeah, if it didn't have to serve in a kind of protective capacity.
It's again, now it's giving me ocean type images, which is very interesting. And it's saying or expressing it really wants to be a champion of my creativity.
Yeah.
It wants to relate to me via really expansive creativity, like like almost the opposite in some ways. Release the logic, release the power drives, release all the structured rotes, can do this, can do that, can do anything that's asked of it, and just flow like the ocean into creativity. The creativity, ocean of creativity, I guess, is what it's conveying.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you just said to me that's fair and right and true. And the fear of missing out and I, meaning these two parts, work symbiotically together. They're they're motivators for each other in some way.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Definitely see how they're both, again, they both have that motivating kind of quality and that positive aim.
And they're both, the analytic part is saying, for us to release is the only way for you to feel any expansion and not constriction. And I can feel that. I can literally feel that that's true.
Yeah.
Like I can viscerally feel that. And that goes back to the holding on the reins, the constraining, all of this.
Yeah.
Much of this, it's saying to me, much of this is tied to the young one exile, where, you know, those were the circumstances that they took on these roles.
Right. All there for a good reason.
Yeah.
So I am excited that you and I have a call scheduled 1 week from now. And I would suggest, if it feels right, you know, stay with these parts, see what else they have to show you in the meantime. And if it does feel right in our next conversation, we can pick up here and,
Yeah, I agree. There's some wonderful, which is not usually how my sessions have been, wonderful imagery that these parts are offering. And like you said, I think this is an entry into a space that hasn't been approachable before.
Yeah.
By all the other parts that we've worked with were far more structured and far more. So, and that would tie into this, you know, this concept of expansive creativity.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's a perfect place to end. It's a yeah, very lovely opening.
I think so. And yeah, I think that we can find our way back here.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. And it's nice that I can trust that I know you take such copious notes that you'll be able to lead. So thank you for that.
And I will also send you the call. And,
oh, yes, please do. I'll love to listen to it because I think it may need some listening before we talk again.
Yep. And I try to always listen back.
I
listen back to calls right before I have the calls.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
The whole call listen to.
Yeah. You know, I can sometimes do that on 3x speed and just kind of quickly catch up. And that's also when I'm taking my editing notes. So that's my workflow when I have time to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay. So I feel that that's something that I can, you know, pose to all my parts that we can all, you know, trust in that. And they seem to like that external validation and that external trust that, you know, you can keep us.
Yeah.
You know, remembering.
I'm with you.
That's perfect.
That's great.
All right. So, well, I hope you have a great next week.
You too. Thank you. Thank you to these parts, and can't wait to continue.
Yeah, me too. And good on you for your big journey.
You too.
All right. Talk to you again.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Anything come up for you? Any parts?
I think what's come up is more, or at least what came up feels like process.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just talk it through a little bit and see where it goes.
Great.
So the last few sessions, and this has been kind of a theme for me over the last bit, however long, I don't really time things, but say of late, there's been this recognition of emotions when they show up or feelings when they show up.
Yeah. And
I have this now, which I never had before, this ability to recognize them as showing up and recognizing that they are parts like the lonely child or the FOMO or the hanging on to the reins, pulling back on the reins. So this seems to be some kind of process going on where I'm assuming, best I can say, it feels like myself is getting some distance from being so deeply blended with everything, so hyper focused on parts as they arose.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay. So it's feeling like strengthening is not really the right word because self is always solid and strong. But there's this strengthening is the wrong word, but so we'll call it distancing. That's allowing it to have a perspective it never had before. Maybe that feels better.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be this cadre of, or at one point, I think I described it as a black cauldron of things, energies that keep coming up. Sometimes they're fleeting and I don't really catch them. I notice them, but don't catch them, or have like with the loneliness, I could name it, I could feel it, or the FOMO. So along with this process, because that's what it feels like it is, and this distancing or perspective, growing perspective within the self, there also is this constellation of things that are swirling around that feel like I don't think they're parts, but they're energies, maybe inspirations that want to emerge, almost as if they're beckoning me towards a very different way of kind of being. And I guess that's why I call it a process, because they all seem to be somehow at some varying energies and varying times, somehow playing together.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the system part, eh?
Yeah, it all makes sense to me. Sounds like you're seeing more and being invited more by more and more parts that maybe formerly were all just in a bit of a stew that was more difficult to discern who's who.
Yeah. So I think this week I had several that came up. They were fleeting. I wasn't able to hold them. I had moments where I was like, oh, that's what that is. I recognize that. Now I see it. And then it fleeted away again. So I don't know whether there's some way to get a handle on those, or whether those are putting their hand up, kind of like, a virtual Zoom hand saying, here, but they're not hooking me in the same way the other couple have in the past. And I have a feeling there's a lot of them that are there.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
Just that it makes sense. Yeah, I think that when we start this work, we have our handful of protectors and maybe exiles that come up first, and they're kind of obvious, and they feel like, well, this is just me. This is the way I am, because these parts are always up, and then over time we just maybe the hundreds of more subtle parts that haven't gotten to express themselves or that only come out in fleeting moments are being invited or are inviting you to notice them.
It feels like there's some baseline level that I've always been living with. Yeah. So some probably dominant or forefront, what I would have called up until being introduced to IFS, feelings or emotions or things that I was always working with or trying to avoid or suppress or get away from, kind of the darker energies, lower energies.
Right.
There's some baseline there, and I think I've only started to begin to understand what that baseline is.
And so the baseline is kind of the typical, you're saying, typical presentation, or the parts that are up more often and more visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of those might be analyzer, kind of intellectual. Let's see, I'm looking at my notes from our last conversation. Yeah, sense maker.
And I think one feeling that feels very strong within me among all this process that's going on is related to the part that I described as, holding on to the reins, containing, constraining, limiting. That seems to be a bit of a theme for me energetically. It's very present. Like it needs attention, or it needs to be doing something else. There's a tension within me around it. It seems to be a main player in the ability or inability to actually open in new ways. And I think we've talked to this part in the past. I can't even remember. I think it might have been related to the middle one.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
Well, I know in our last conversation, we were discussing parts that are containing and restraining and providing structure. And the metaphor of a pearl.
Oh, yeah.
Was coming up in the oyster shell. Or is it oyster? Clam? I forget where pearls come from, but
it's oysters, aren't you? Where do you really bring up a very important question that must need answering.
That's right.
So let's find the right answer. Yeah. I think this hardening okay, so they're marine oysters or freshwater mussels.
Good to know. Oh, okay. Or mussels.
So
in our last conversation, that was attributed to the analyzing part, and it was saying, yeah, I keep the pearl safe. The pearl seemed to be around creativity, perhaps, and I'm sure other things. And it was saying that it provides structure and function and containment and safety.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's been along with this containment and creativity, they belong together. And there is, I remember the term I used was itchy suit.
Yes.
And I think that this is kind of a theme that's kind of really bubbling up from this process. And I think it might be good to try to enter into that.
All right. I think so.
Because being hardened or isolated, again, back to the loneliness, existing in isolation. I think all these things had many parts that were playing roles in them, some more dominant than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
and we also had parts when we talked about going there in our last conversation. We had parts saying that it would require a specific approach, a holistic approach that was less cognitive, which would make sense. I mean, and if we are going to meet a part that is the analyzer, for example, yeah, we can get to know how it functions from that distance, from the perspective of self.
Yeah, I think maybe we should start moving in that direction. I don't know if we go for the image of the pearl and the oyster.
Well, we go with the feelings in the body that come up when yeah, that kind of analyzing is present, when the sense maker is present.
Okay, let's do that.
Just see what that feels like.
And immediately as you said it, I felt a defensive bodily reaction.
Okay.
You know,
Sounds
the
important.
kind of stiffening, the kind of push away, almost lean back, that kind of reaction.
Okay, let it know it's welcome. And we don't have to go anywhere that doesn't feel right.
Okay. It's showing me again with the images, which is different. It's showing me like a kaleidoscope almost image, shapes, but it's really interesting. It's more like a stained glass window frame.
Okay.
And it has kind of a grayish dark background. It's almost like a spider web shape, but it's not the same consistent shapes within it like a spider web. And it's this pinkish color.
Okay.
It's like a net, almost a very, very beautiful net.
Okay.
But a very graphic net.
Okay.
That's what's come up from my saying.
Great.
This is okay.
How about the feeling of the stiffening? Is that the same as the net, or is that a part saying don't go there? Or
it's interesting. It's the stiffening. It's mostly in the behind the neck area. When I'm explaining what the net is or talking about the net, it loosens, it lessens.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
And in general, the net has this calming feeling.
Okay.
I don't know what it is or why it's presenting.
How do you feel towards it?
Curious. I have a sense that there may be that it has on offer some clarity. I don't know. For some reason, I associate that word with it.
Okay. Yeah. So let it know you're curious. And you could ask it to tell you anything it wants you to know. Anything about itself.
It's saying it somehow represents the meaningful parts of the self.
Okay.
And an important one that it's imaging out just in movement. It's very interesting. It's rhythmically kind of pulsating kind of in its movement. It's saying connected. It's an image of connectedness.
Okay.
Which I guess makes sense if it's a net. It's all connected.
It also makes sense as one of the important parts of itself. It's one of the 8 C's.
It's conveying, doesn't really talk directly to me. It conveys in some way, which is different. it's conveying an underlying importance of connectedness.
Yeah.
And a lack. So there's this very calm, peaceful, gentle feeling to it. It moves, it has this lovely kind of rhythmic moving. It's very beautiful. That's the connected energy. And then it towards its edges, it's a little bit haggled and not connected. And there's some kind of holes where it says there's suffering where this connection has been.
Yeah.
But that's its
Okay.
sharing.
I have a question. If it has anything to do with containing and restraining and not opening, or if it knows anything about those feelings.
It says yes. It says there's an irony, or I guess it's irony, that the net is a containing of the parts, the insecurities around those edges, and where there's holes and where there's disconnectedness. It's still containing. But that it's in a restraining kind of way, not in a liberating kind of way.
Okay.
And it's showing me this other lovely, movement and beauty. And it's saying that is really my function. It's not how you experience it as connectedness and beauty and movement and impermanence, always changing. You find it more like an old fishing net. You experience it like a tangled fishing net that's restraining you, and you're trying to get out of it. And so it's sharing that it's an irony. It's playing both these roles, but I got dialed into the beauty and the connectedness of it and the health and the clarity of it. I'm trapped in it, in its shadow.
Okay.
Existence. If you understand the metaphor it's giving me.
Yeah. Somebody's trapped in the shadow. It might be a lot of parts trapped.
Yeah, and it's kind of as it moves and the geometric shapes and its beautiful hue and color of like a calm pink with this contrasting background, and I can just feel its movement, and it's beckoning in that movement. It has a energy that's like beckoning. Has a fluidity and a flexibility. All it's showing me this wonderful, beautiful imagery of itself, and it's contrasting with what I actually embodied feel.
Okay.
That's a very interesting experience. It's strangling, caught up in, restraining, rough.
Okay. That's the embodied. What I feel is the restraint. Okay. Yeah.
Tangled.
Yeah.
Not like the net itself, and this is the message it's saying. The net itself, whether it's the fishing net or the beautiful, rhythmic pulsating image of this kaleidoscopy type net, it regardless, it's conveying to me, regardless of what I'm experiencing, it is connectedness. And it's a lot in how I am working with it, perceiving it, hearing it, experiencing it. Kind of, it could be the beautiful version, but everything is trapped in this fishing, this tangled fishing net.
Okay. Does it notice you there? And does it have any thoughts about who it's talking to and the qualities of this one who's curious about it?
It's very aware of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's indicating that it's always been aware of me, irregardless of any kind of chronological embodied experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
It has a very uncluttered, direct kind of view.
Mm-hmm.
Self.
Okay. How old does it think you are?
It's saying that the red, the pink, the illuminated, pulse, beautiful one, says it recognizes that I'm a woman of a certain age.
Yes. Okay, so it's got that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's beckoning that chronological embodied being, that version of self embodied. Mm-hmm. It's beckoning to that, and it's acknowledging that up until that point, and even as I think we had this come up in the previous,
mm-hmm.
even before the embodiment, it's been this tangled, restraining, rough fishing net. And that is where I've been caught, literally.
Okay.
And I was born into the fishing net version.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beckoning for me to release all that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's something I'd like to understand better, and we can either learn this from it or ask from it. It has this view of your present day self, mm-hmm. But I also keep hearing you say about I'm caught, and so I'm wondering, are there images of this present day self being caught, or are those actually exiled parts, for example, that are caught?
Yeah, it's images
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of, chronologically speaking, my embodied self, not myself, capital S.
Okay.
But my embodied experience has been all entangled in that and caught in that. So it would be the little one, it would be the middle one, it would be Mama Bear.
Okay.
There are parts very much caught up in it. It's showing me, it's explaining that it's somehow, it's this connectedness. It keeps emphasizing its connectedness. It's almost trying to tell me that it is a context. So the embodied context.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's beckoning to self to move, to acknowledge parts, to heal.
Yeah.
And to move away from that perspective. That's what the beckoning feels like. It's encouraging self to work with all the things caught in the context.
Right. Right. Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering who has that perspective? I mean, if it's not self, like what is it saying for self to move away from? What part? I guess I'm just a little confused, and it's okay. I don't have to.
No, it's a very good question, because it's saying to me that self is in and of itself a very peaceful, calm, connected, joyous being. And that self has been blended
Right.
to blindness,
Mm-hmm.
myopic view,
Mm-hmm.
with everything that's tied up and caught up in this fishing net context.
Okay. Yeah. So if we were to ask this part, okay, let self go to one of these exiles, let's say, how does it respond to that? Does it say, okay, I'll step out of the way, or I'll point the way and go ahead? Or does it have concerns about that?
No, self is fully willing to explore.
How about this web part?
The web part is fine with that. The web part keeps saying, remember the pearl.
Mm-hmm. But the web does a lot of the restraining, does it not?
Yeah.
What's it afraid would happen if it didn't?
Saying that everything would just fall asunder.
Mm-hmm.
That it's staying, even if it's a tangled, restrained, kind of uncomfortable place in one aspect of it, in its shadow aspect, it does keep everything connected.
Okay.
It's not connected I can feel the connection. It's just a juggernaut type.
Okay.
And if it didn't do that, everything would just kind of fall loose.
Okay.
Have no direction, no.
Would it value or appreciate the self's help in holding parts together, holding parts in the connection?
It's saying that it would value not being the rough and tough and tangled fishing net anymore.
Okay.
It wants to be the beautiful, pulsating, pure connectedness
Okay.
of the being. That's what it wants.
Okay.
And it would be more than appreciative of self if it was able to be unblended and unblinded to aid in that process.
Okay. Okay. And so that's what it needs, is self's leadership and self's additional connection with parts, so that there isn't a feeling of the fishing net, the missing pieces, the rough edges.
Exactly. And it's giving me some imagery of doubt that self is unblended and unblinded and unbiased, actually accomplish that which it's considering a freeing exercise for the part itself.
Yeah. Okay. So it has some doubt about self being on the job to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's acknowledging that self is gaining new perspective. It can see that, and it delights in that. But it has some lack of confidence in its full thrust ability to take on this complexity.
Okay. Does it have parts that it's pointing to that it thinks would get in the way, or does it have anything more it wants to say about those maybe obstacles or challenges?
It's conveying that it believes that the parts that are all caught up in this context of restraint and limiting and isolation are all able and willing to get uncaught and to become other energy. It is saying what it doesn't trust is the strength of self.
Right.
And I used strength of self before and backed away from it, but this part is really saying, no, it's the fortitude. It's does self yet have the strength to work through this. The parts are willing and able. That's where it's reticent.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any response to that? I mean, how would we know?
Well, what's interesting.
What would it need to see, perhaps?
What's interesting is I had this moment of self-doubt, which is a term we use, right? But I don't think self is really able to doubt itself. So it must be another part or something.
I would assume so, yeah.
It was a funny exchange where felt like self saying, well, maybe I'm not fit for purpose. And then this recognition that, wait a minute.
Who's that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, and as I explain that, this net part or this kaleidoscope part, whatever we're going to call it, connected part, it's saying that's the point.
That there are doubting parts.
Yeah, it needs to know that the connected part needs to know that self is really unblending and able to not be fully caught up in the embodied part experience and able to be separate from it. That's what it needs.
Okay.
And self wants to say, but of course I'm able to do that. That's how I exist. That's who I am. And there's this self-doubt part that questioning, overlaying it.
And is probably seen and pointing to the times when self is blended with parts. Yeah. Yeah, that's the question.
Self keeps saying, look, I'm here, I'm present, I'm showing up, I'm growing in perspective, I'm far less blended than I have been, I'm fully capable of all of that. And then the doubter, self-doubt, are you sure?
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we could just turn our attention to the doubt part.
Okay.
See how you're noticing it in your body.
It's a very distinct uncomfortableness.
Yeah. Yeah. How would it feel to welcome that part? Let it know that you're picking up on that uncomfortableness. But let it know that just like all the other parts, it's welcome. And we know it has a good reason for being there.
As I do that, it's throwing off super strong vibrational uncomfortableness.
Okay. Is it too much?
Like protection, like here, take this. Can you withstand that?
And how's your response? Does it feel like too much, or does it feel like?
Oh, it's fine.
Great.
And self is saying to it, look, I can withstand it. Give me more if you need to make yourself comfortable. No problem. And now it's easing away from that uncomfortable bump up, that reactive bump up.
Yeah, just let it know you'd like to understand it. And then it can talk to you however it wants and tell you about itself.
It's calming now. Self is allowing, a very calm energy. And self is offering some curiosity and concern for. It's asking it, what are you fearing? Your doubt. What is your doubt? Is it a fear? because it feels like a fear when it activates. When it's slow to respond.
Okay. So I don't know, it can respond any way it wants. And it can tell you about anything that it wants.
So it wants to show a life reel.
Okay.
And it's invited me to watch. And it's slowly starting to play some vignettes or scenes from my embodied life. And it's showing me times of disappointment. It's focusing a bit on some abandonment. It's showing a variety of earlier life interactions where, a lack of trust. And lots of gaslighting. And so it kind of slowed down the life reel and said, with these kind of circumstances, I have to doubt.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Me too.
It's saying you need caution everywhere you go.
Yeah. You've had a lot of very real experiences of being gaslit or being disappointed, abandoned, right? Yeah.
It's funny, it just said something to me that I hadn't really thought about, but I've always kind of had an embodied life philosophy of just questioning everything, like just not accepting whatever anything is on face value. And it's saying that's connected to this.
Yeah. And that's been very valuable, hasn't it?
It has been hugely valuable. It's formed life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So it's kind of joking and saying, a little bit of doubt goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just show your appreciation, how much it's helped.
It's as I do that, it's saying to me that I recognize there's a shadow aspect to this for, it itself is saying, there's a price to be paid. There's a shadow side.
Right.
To all this questioning.
Right.
And that plays out in very common form of holding back, restraint, limitation. That's kind of part of the functioning of doubt. It makes you slow yourself down and question, and there's an underlying lack of safety in so much doubt. There's no trust if you have to doubt everything.
Does it feel like you're understanding it and that you actually appreciate it?
Yeah, it's really, really happy about that.
Great.
And it's saying that this is a step of self-unblending because self was just so deeply engaged in constant questioning and often so much self-doubt because
this part was doing its job.
Yeah. And it was very productive. And it's saying what the problem is with so many of these things, and it's saying, like with Sally and her or just preeminent ability to manage, or the fear of missing out's ability to kind of keep movement towards something all the time, that these parts, and this doubt included, have been life shaping and life performing, and that it's happy to be acknowledged for that. But it's also saying that self has been so blended into these activities.
Yeah.
Like there was no separation. It was just head down, bum up, carry on.
Yeah. And what does it think? I mean, did it notice the process of itself unblending from you just now? When you take a moment to feel it, take a moment to welcome the physical sensations it's sending your way, and to hear it and appreciate it, that just how quickly and effectively you can get that perspective and distance.
It acknowledges that, but then again, it jumps right in with but.
Yeah. But what?
But you haven't always been able to do it.
True. or you haven't always done it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I'm acknowledging that. And saying, that's true.
Yeah.
And that, once you have some clarity and perspective, that you can build on that.
Yeah. I'm also curious if it is doubting your presence just in the moment. Like, another way to ask that is, does it see that or agree that if you can do this for it, you could do it for another part?
It doesn't doubt it. It knows it's a fact. It has this knowing that this is the way it works. This is the way it is. This is truth. But in its nature, it then wraps right around instantaneously and says, yeah, but can you? It's just such a habituated response because the self has been so deeply blended and blinded.
Yeah. Yep. I have other questions I can come up with for this part, or you can go wherever you like.
Please do. I was just acknowledging that we're sitting kind of far more comfortably together. That was what I was doing in that quiet moment. We were just kind of pausing together, kind of suspended in space together. Self and self and this doubt, this constant
Yeah.
questioning, this
Yeah. You could ask it what it would rather be doing with its energy if it didn't have to work so hard.
It's funny, like it says, like so many of the other parts, it wants to be supporting.
Yes.
It wants to be supportive. It wants to encourage, and it's always the same path, this kind of freedom of creativity, this capacity to just do good and be productive, and it wants to be helping, supporting.
Okay.
And it emphasizes this as all that it wants, that fully, all the restraints to be gone, to be able to emerge without the tangled fishing net and the fears and the doubts and loneliness and the lack of connectedness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so can the two of you see a way that it might aid in your ability to connect with other parts?
It's saying that the questioning is a positive thing. It's used as a perspective, as part of the experience, and not as a protection, and that could be a very, very meaningful role for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm doing when I'm guiding someone, is just asking questions and checking if they're blended or if they're in self energy.
Yeah.
And having my own somewhat healthy sense of doubt of, is this what they're telling me coming from a place of self, or is that a story from a part?
All these parts in this session have been feeling an energy of leaning kind of into connectedness, away from isolation and restraint, and all collectively growing in a energy of liberation, emerging, which is what I think I used the word before. And I can feel that I self can feel there's a certain level of percolating excitement.
Yes.
And they all kind of just, crack that oyster open,
Yeah.
Emerge, that aperture that I mentioned last session, the aperture is opening. Don't let it close again. Don't let it pause. Let it continue in that process.
Okay. Well, do you want to go towards that more and see what we can learn about that? Okay. Yeah, just see if there are any other parts that are objecting to that.
Well, the parts all really want this. There seems to be some collective energy among them.
Okay.
I don't feel any real resistance.
Great. Okay.
And of course, the question that got raised, and I'm not sure exactly where it came from, maybe the doubter. What is the pearl?
Yeah.
And why does it need such a hardened shell that can, in some ways, blend into environments and remain unseen?
You could ask if there is any kind of shell present. I could also refer to my notes from our last conversation. That at least some of that shell or itchy coat had to do with an analyzing part that provided structure, function, and safety.
Getting an image of the tangled fishing net kind of overlaying the oyster shell.
Yeah.
That there may be similes for what's going on, just different imaging for how it's presenting.
Yeah, you could ask it if it will let you get to know the shell better and figure out who that is. If it would step aside.
So it's willing to step aside.
Okay.
Is thanking me for showing up and for caring. Thanking it for all its multitude of functions and in all its difficulty to perform, how it performed, the benefits that my life has seen. as a result of it. So it's fine, it's stepped away.
Okay.
And now I'm seeing the shell.
Yeah. You can invite the shell to notice you, let it know that you're here to understand it.
I asked it who it was,
Mhm.
and it said it's the protector of primal wounds.
Yeah.
Waiting to see if it wants to say something else.
Okay.
It's inviting me in
Okay.
and saying it wants me to experience its inner beauty and strength.
Okay.
So I'm now moving in towards the
Okay.
inner.
Take your time.
And that is again giving me this imagery of the aperture opening as the oyster is open to enter.
Take
And
your time. Stay curious.
telling it that it's very beautiful inside. It has that, pearl essence within, very beautiful, reflecting light. Has a feel of water movement. It's asking me to respect that although I know the pearl is there, that I not approach the pearl.
Okay.
That I feel the chamber of the inner oyster, that I feel its function in its physicality. And it does have a wonderful lustrous glow and a very, very safe feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're showing an appreciation for how nice it is on the inside and how strong it is and tough it is on the outside. Taking care of something as important as primal wounds.
I'm expressing appreciation for its beauty. Communicating with it that I can feel a sense of safety within and a sense of beauty. Asking it if there's anything specific it wants me to know. It's saying it wants me to recognize how profoundly safe it keeps these wounds. It's like being in a museum that's perfectly climatized to preserve delicate things. It has that kind of perfection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm saying that is evident, obviously evident, that I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And it's showing me its great care for these wounds, its tenderness towards them, its fierceness on the outside with this protective shell. I'm asking it if it would tell me what the wounds are, share with me. Oh, I got a really, really, really bright light. Saying you know what they are.
Okay.
So that this bright light is actually self pouring attention onto it.
Okay.
Which it was now not able to do before because it was so blended. It never would have been able to find its way here to the oyster.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking if it trusts me.
Yes.
It says it does. It trusts me.
Great. Yeah, and it trusts you to get closer to those other parts and those wounded parts. To learn about them, to help them and heal them.
Yeah, it's showing images, kind of life real images. And it's conveying that some of these things can't be conveyed in a life reel because they were kind of pre cognitive ability to make a life reel.
Yep. Yep.
And that's why they're so preciously contained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can't really, they're not explainable in that same way and solvable in that way.
Exactly. And they're primal because they're from just really the origins of embodiment.
Okay.
They're just very, very precious.
Yeah.
It's conveying that being okay with things is very, very important.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. It's conveying that although these are primal wounds and not all of them can be put towards cognitive memories,
Mm-hmm.
it recognizes in talking with the self that it does not necessarily need to keep up this function of fierce, hardened protection.
Yeah. Yeah. What would it need from you in order to relax?
Saying reassurance. Needing to know that self has the perspective and the clarity and the concern and compassion to allow this to open up and be freed from captivity.
Yeah. And maybe it would help to let it know that, they're not freeing them doesn't just mean releasing them to empty void. It's self holding them and them being in self space.
Yeah.
Because they might need a protective space a lot like where they are. We don't know until we learn from them. But it's something that self can provide.
Yeah. It's indicating to me that it's all part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
This gaining perspective, gaining clarity.
Right.
Um,
Learning what the protectors do, why they do it, how they do it, so that they can trust that if they are to relax, if they are to give up some of that control, self understands how it's done and why. And they're not alone in that.
yeah. There's a little bit of the doubt crawling back
Mm-hmm.
up, saying, "Hey, wait, though. That's. Are you sure? Are you? Is self able?"
Yeah,
It just couldn't help itself. It couldn't just sit on the sidelines.
it's okay. Just acknowledge it. We do want to be sure.
Yeah. It's saying to me, look, you've done a wonderful thing here, journeying towards the pearl.
Mm-hmm.
And that working with these images is a very different approach.
Different from the cognitive,
life real type stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that it is not as direct.
Mm-hmm.
And so these parts, the connected net, the shell, the oyster, they're thanking me for approaching with care and openness
Yeah.
to their means of communicating with me, because it's completely outside the analyzer or Sally
Right.
or any of those other
Right.
parts, or even outside those other exiles who are very, very rooted in cognitive memory.
Right.
So it's less direct.
Mm-hmm.
So very kindly, they're sending self-appreciation.
Nice. Yeah.
And they're saying that more of this is probably a good.
Yep.
Make space for this kind of image-based.
Yeah, it
work.
requires this space and it requires this time. If you're rushing in to, I remember earlier, that, let's crack this oyster kind of sentiment.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can be a real obstacle. So I think you're doing great in the way that you're taking your time and spending as much time as each part needs with it.
I think it's an interesting exercise in moving in their way, at their pace, at their expression.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, giving it space, because it's not, the analyzer wants to pop up and
Right.
That's not making sense. This needs to be A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
So it's what one would call a bit mind bending to go at it from this angle, but
yep. Moving
it feels
in their way. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it feels very positive to be able to make, and in some way, it's probably an exercise in opening up, which is what everything needs anyways.
Right. Yeah. And moving in their way and kind of speaking their language, I think also demonstrates to them, yes, I can go to another part or the parts that you're protecting, etc., because you're continuing to build that trust by showing them what you can do for each of them, understanding each of them individually when, only self can do that. They don't have that depth of understanding of each other. They might have a good idea. They've been there working side by side for a while, but can't quite shine a light yeah, move in that same way.
Yeah, the companionship that self can provide is a very different companionship than
Right.
other people can provide for each other. It has a completely different texture, a completely different feel to it. And that's, I think, what this is really pointing out for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's also part of helping this process of perspective for self and unblinding and self, that's a very, very different perspective that self.
Yeah.
Yeah. This feels like a natural transition point.
Okay.
And it'll be important, I think, to go back to more of this work as it's inviting me to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Again, I'm assuming that kind of the deeper we go, the more and more caution and time you'll need to take. So, I'm happy to continue doing that with you. I imagine we'll need at least this much time to start working with those pearls, those wounds, or anything like that.
Yeah, it has that layered effect or feel like coming through some of the more obvious parts and going into deeper places where there are parts that, are quite different than the ones that we've worked with before.
Yeah.
So I would really appreciate that and look forward to that.
Yeah, you could ask if there's anything that any of these parts might like for you to leave behind, whether that's to comfort parts that are gonna wait for your visit in the future, or as a breadcrumb to get back here, or anything like that.
What the parts from today are saying is that it needs self to continue to bring openness and to work on openness. It seems to be a big nugget for these parts, the blendedness and the blindedness of self, that the deep embodiment experience of self, and that it needs self to emerge from that.
Okay.
So I guess it's giving me a little bit of homework.
Sure. And I might also just turn the mirror around to some of those parts, and where does the not openness come from? We're talking to the restraining net, the doubting part, and the oyster shell, and just to help them understand that we do want openness, and it is the protectors themselves that
you're blocking that,
are closed up, are closing things up.
Yeah, that's a really, really good and fruitful point to kind of remind them and remind self of.
Yeah, when if you're ever feeling like, oh, I'm feeling closed, well, that is a part that's blended with the splendid. It's not a failure of self, or something that is wrong with the nature of self. It's the closed off part that are getting busy.
Yeah, it's really, really important perspective. Thank you.
Okay.
Because the parts are happy to point to self.
Right.
But it is a system.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's definitely something to work with.
Okay. So we'll bookmark this.
Yep.
And continue next time.
Even we could start next time, if I remember, or maybe you could remember, to go back to that point about, that whenever openness is a theme, that the protectors are an important part of that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll make a note of it. I'll send you the call.
Great.
And you can do it again soon.
All right. So you're opening, you said your calendar on the 16th.
That sounds, I don't know.
Is that right?
I don't know. Sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay. Last time I was late, so I wanted to try to make sure that I am checking the server.
Okay. I will make a note of that too.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, James.
Okay. Thank you.
Talk to you
Have a good
again.
rest of your day. Okay. Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Do you want to help bring more self-energy to the world? If you'd like to participate in calls or help out with this project in any way, I'd love to hear your ideas. Join the Discord server or contact me at james@liveifs.com. A huge thanks to our audio engineer, Yvonne, for your care and diligence in editing the calls. To every caller for your courage in sharing some of your parts. And to anyone out there getting to know their internal system, keep going. Who knows, that might be the most selfless, helpful thing you can do for others, and you're the only one who can do it. If you'd like to see us reach the largest audience, we must please the almighty suggestion algorithms at iTunes and YouTube, and they don't care about the power of IFS. They're looking for likes and shares and comments, and the sooner the better. Follow the links in the show notes right here in your podcast player to make your wishes known. And now, a minute of meditation. Or if you prefer, pull over. You can do it in 60 seconds. Just click one of those links. They're right there, and give us a like or a 5-star rating. It would really help. If you think this project is helping people, you're helping people by sharing it. Thank you.